Hello, welcome back. Time for Chapter 7 of Skinnybones. If you remember from Chapters 5 and 6, we learned more about Alex and his poor baseball skills and his big mouth. If you remember that he was kind of teasing about how great he was as a pitcher, which he really isn't, which TJ heard about that and made up a pitching contest between TJ and Alex. Alex tried to get out of it, couldn't get out of it, and we found out that Alex is not a good pitcher. It didn't go well. Even with his sense of humor, it didn't help at all. So he went home feeling really bad about himself. We also met Alex's friend Brian Dunlop. You'll hear a lot more about him later on in this book. Time for Chapter 7. Sometimes I wonder why I even bother to play baseball at all. I hate the uniforms, I can't throw, and I don't like playing center field. Lately, I've been giving this a lot of thought, and there's only one thing I can come up with. I play for the caps. Baseball caps are probably the greatest invention of all time. No matter what you look like, just as soon as you put on a baseball cap, you look just like Steve Garvey. Steve Garvey was a great baseball player 30, 40 years ago for the Los Angeles Dodgers and the San Diego Padres. Even my cat looks like Steve Garvey with my cap on. Once I did an experiment with my grandmother just to prove it. My grandmother's about 80 years old, but she doesn't look it. She doesn't need a cane, and she only wears glasses when she reads. One of the things I like best about my grandmother is her blue hair. It's just about the coolest hair I've ever seen. I'm not sure that she really knows it's blue. I think she might be a little colorblind. One time at dinner, she told my mother that she puts a steel gray rinse on it. I started to tell her that it looked more like a steel blue, but my mother stuck a roll in my mouth. Anyway, after we finished eating that night, I ran up to my room and grabbed my baseball cap. Then I snuck up behind my grandmother and put it on her head. Just as I thought. Another Steve Garvey. My grandmother wasn't a very good sport about it. She pulled the cap off her head and dropped it on the floor. Boy, I had really messed up her blue hair. In fact, it was so messy that right at the top of her head, I noticed a little bald spot. I offered to let her put my cap back on, but she ignored me. I really felt sorry for her. She must have gone to the same barber I go to. My barber, Mr. Peoples, has given me more bald spots than I can even count. I'll never forget the time he made my head look like a grapefruit. As soon as I walked in his shop that day, I knew I was in trouble. I always think it's a good idea to find out what kind of mood Mr. Peoples is in before I sit down in his chair. Sometimes, when barbers aren't feeling very happy, they like to give kids funny haircuts to cheer themselves up. "Hi, Mr. Peoples," I said with a smile. "How are you feeling today?" Mr. Peoples looked at me and frowned. "I'll tell you how I'm feeling," he growled. "I'm hot, tired, and hungry. Any more questions?" No, Mr. Peoples, no more questions," as I said as I began backing out of his shop. "Gee, I think I hear my mother calling. Maybe I'd better come back tomorrow." "Knock it off, Alex, and sit down," he ordered, giving me a real disgusted look. Mr. Peoples has known me since I was 2, so he thinks he can talk to me like that. "Are you positive you want me to sit down?" I asked. "I mean, if you're not in a good mood, I'd be happy to leave you alone for a little while." "Sit," he said gruffly, pointing to the chair. Slowly, I climbed into the big red seat. "Well, okay," I agreed. "But I really don't need a big haircut. I'd just like you to take a little bit off the sides, okay?" Mr. Peoples didn't hear a word I said. He was too busy plugging in his electric clippers. "Wait a minute, Mr. Peoples," I said quickly. "Do you really think that you need the clippers today? I just want a little trim, okay?" "Who's the barber here, Alex? You or me?" he asked sharply. That's when I decided to be quiet. If there was one thing I didn't want to do, it was make the guy any madder than he already was. Mr. Peoples started clipping. No, wait. Clipping is the wrong word. Mr. Peoples started scalping. You'd have made a great Indian, Mr. Peoples, I said, but the clippers were so loud he didn't hear me. He whizzed those loud buzzing clippers all around the back of my head and headed up toward my ears. And all of a sudden I heard him say, whoopsie. Whoopsie? I asked nervously. Did you just say whoopsie, Mr. Peoples? I looked in the mirror. Right over my left ear, I saw the whoopsie. It was a big, round, bald spot. This may be just a little shorter than you wanted it, Alex, said Mr. Peoples, but at least it will be nice and cool for the summer. Nice and cool? I asked angrily. How do you figure that? If there are any more whoopsies, I'll have to spend the whole summer wearing a big brown bag over my head. Have you ever spent the summer in a paper bag, Mr. Peoples? Look on the bright side, Alex, he replied. Think how easy it will be to take care of. Instead of combing through a lot of hair, all you have to do is polish your head a little. Then he laughed. I couldn't stand to look in the mirror anymore, so I closed my eyes and waited until he was finished. After circling my head with the clippers about 20 more times, he finally shut them off. Slowly, I opened my eyes and looked into the mirror. I couldn't believe it. I've seen more hair on an egg. I turned my head and looked at it from every angle, hoping to find hair, but it was all gone. How do you like it? Asked Mr. Peoples, handing me a mirror. How do I like what? I growled. Your hair, of course, he answered. I gazed down at the floor. I liked it a lot better when it was on my head, I replied as Mr. Peoples got the broom and started to sweep my hair into the dustpan. He laughed. I guess that means you think it's a little too short, huh? No, Mr. Peoples, I answered. If it was too short, at least some of it would still be growing on my head. I'd say it's too gone. He laughed again. That'll be $5, he said, holding out his hand. I slapped the money down and ran home as fast as I could. My mother met me at the door. Look what that butcher did to me, I yelled, pointing to my head. My mother stared at me for a second. I could tell she was having a hard time trying not to laugh. Don't worry, she said, finally getting control of herself. The good thing about hair is that it always grows back. Yeah, well, that might be the good thing about hair, I snapped. But what's the good thing about no hair? My mother started to giggle. Then she turned and left the room. Where are you going? I yelled. You've got to help me figure out what to do with all of this scalp. I'll be right back, she answered, still snickering. I'm just going to the kitchen for a minute. All of a sudden, I have this tremendous craving for a grapefruit. Very funny, I screamed at her. Very, very funny. Anyway, right after that, I remembered about my baseball cap. I hurried up to my room to find it. I opened up my closet and breathed a sigh of relief. For once, I had remembered to put it back on the hook where it belonged. I put it on my head, and it slipped down a little bit. Being bald makes your head a lot thinner. I looked in the mirror. Yep, just like old Steve Garvey. Works every time. I just wish that putting on a baseball cap could make me hit home runs like Steve Garvey. I guess you could say that hitting a home run is sort of a dream of mine. I don't think it will ever come true, though. My father says that it's pretty hard to hit a home run when all you can do is bunt. I've always thought the word bunt was a dumb word. First time I heard it, I was only about 7. This kid on my baseball team was on his way up to bat. Before he left the bench, he turned around and said to me, I think I'm going to bunt. At first, I didn't really know what he was talking about, but whatever it was, it didn't sound very good. I tried to figure out what he meant and finally decided that bunt was probably another word for puke. Oh no, I thought to myself, that kid's sick and no one even knows it. I got off the bench and went running over to the coach and told him that I thought the kid was going to start bunting any minute. That's okay, Alex, said the coach. Don't worry about it. I told him to bunt. Now I was really confused. Why in the world would a coach tell one of his players to throw up? What kind of a trick was this? I hoped he wouldn't tell me to bunt too. Listen, Coach, I said, I don't think I could bunt even if I wanted to. I feel pretty good, and I haven't even eaten dinner yet. The coach looked at me kind of funny and told me to sit down. I went back to the bench and watched the kid at bat. I wondered when he was going to do it. When the ball came, he took his bat and held it out to the side. I figured he was just trying to get it out of the way so he didn't bunt on it. Since I was next at bat, I thought that was a pretty nice thing to do. But instead of getting sick, the kid took the bat and lightly knocked the ball down the third baseline. He ran as fast as he could and made it to first base in plenty of time. "Great bunt!" shouted the coach. I turned to the boy sitting next to me. "I didn't see him bunt. Where is it?" "Where's what?" he asked. "You know," I said. "Where's the bunt?" "Weren't you watching?" he asked. "He just bunted the ball down the third baseline and then ran to first." Suddenly, I knew what a bunt really was. Brother, did I ever feel like an idiot. Thank goodness no one ever knew what I had been talking about. Anyway, from that day on, I started working on my bunting. And after 4 years of practice, I'm probably the best bunter in the entire Little League. I guess that's because no one else bothers working on it very much. Sometimes Brian helps me practice my bunting at recess. Last week, TJ saw me and walked over. "Bunting's for sissies," he said, grinning. I ignored him. "Anybody with half a muscle can hit the ball hard," he said. I still ignored him. "Hey, Skinnybones, I just thought of something," he said with a smile. "Only runts bunt. Get it? It rhymes." That's when I decided to stop ignoring him. Brian pitched me another ball. I held the bat out until the very last minute. Then I turned it so sharply that the ball hit TJ right on the head. "Whoops! Sorry there, TJ," I said. "It seems that all I've been doing lately is accidentally hitting you with baseballs. It's a good thing that one hit you on the head. Otherwise, you might have gotten hurt." TJ walked over, shoved me to the ground, and pounced on top of me. "Well, Mr. Skinnybones, we'll just see how good you bunt on Saturday," he said. "What happens on Saturday?" I asked. But TJ didn't understand me. It's hard to speak clearly when your mouth is full of someone else's leg. Then I remembered. Saturday was the day when our Little League teams were scheduled to play each other. Uh-oh. And that's the end of Chapter 7.